Doug Beal says that our next speaker has an evangelical position towards sitting volleyball. He's extolled the virtues of the game while wearing every hat possible in the sport. He's one of the main reasons that our sport rose from obscurity in our country, and he recently earned our country's first gold medal at the Olympics. I spoke to a few of his players, and they all agree that he is a great coach, but they say that he's an even better friend and mentor, and that he's always there when they need him in times of trouble. Let's all welcome Bill Hamiter, our gold medal coach.
That is chasing the giant. For us, it was lessons that we learned transitioning from silver to gold. And of course, gold for us is always that ultimate thing that we want to look at. And I think there's lessons there for all of us as we look at some of these things. So I don't know where to point this. Here we go. Here's kind of what we were facing. And I told a little bit of this last night, but was trying to save some of it. China had never lost a match in 3 Paralympic Games, and really had never even gotten close to losing a match. So it's pretty large that to try to go in and say we want to win a gold medal. It's a lot easier to say that than to actually get out there and earn it. But that's one of the things that challenges we faced. We had never beaten China in a major international competition until the beginning of last year at the Intercontinental Cup. So that was another challenge that we faced. This is just a brief rundown of some of the stuff that happened. So Athens, China was gold. We were bronze. 2006 World Championship, China was gold. We were 6th. Beijing, China's gold. We got silver, was good. World Championships, gold, silver. London, gold, silver. World Championships, gold, silver. You kind of see the pattern there, right? And then even in our pool play match in Rio, China wins in 5. So, in my mind, when I talk about, chasing the giant in our sport, China was the giant. And in more ways than one. Not only did they win, but they had some giants on their team as well that made them, pretty effective, pretty good. And so, some of those lessons we learned. One, I think, you need to transition sometimes from making the giant bigger than they are. And whenever I started with the women, I had somebody tell me that, there's no way anybody can ever beat China. They're just machines. It's impossible. And so, it's one of those things. Do you buy into those mindsets or do you try to change those mindsets? And I believe that a lot of our players were buying into that mindset as well. And so we were trying to do what we could to try to begin to break down some of those mindsets.
It's all good.
John, you want to come up here and talk? So, in sometimes, and we're not the only ones that face those things, those challenges. You guys face some of those too. You have those perennial powers that you play against, and if your athletes have played them once or twice, all of a sudden it begins to be a mental thing, and it's hard to get past that, and you've got to figure out ways to get past it. So, one thing is that you've just got to bring them down to earth. We all have heard those phrases, everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time. But in some ways, you've got to start making them realize that they're not as big as what they are. Some things that made them giants, they had one of the best attackers in the world, and their other attackers were always very, very aggressive. And, they were the best at serve, receive by far. And that was one thing that we were chasing for sure, is how can we narrow this gap, especially on the ace side. At one point we were getting close to where we wanted to be on the serve, receive, but they were still getting more aces, or we were allowing more aces, however you want to say that, than what they were. So we had to narrow that gap. And they were very, very good on defense. So the other thing that I think I learned as trying to go through this process and studying it some was, know your opponent. Again, I think we all kind of know that. What rotations do they begin in? Do they change where they begin their rotations? Do they change in the middle of a match? What do they do in the deciding set? All those types of things. The X's and O, where do they start? What are their patterns? But even more than that, I think then also understanding their psychological and their emotional tendencies are just as big. And for us, looking at China, China's one of those teams that if they're playing pretty well, I mean, they're just emotionally high. You cannot knock them off that horse. And it wasn't until we started really getting a little bit closer to them, so like in our World Championships when we lost in 5, that I really began to see and realize if you can get them down, they have a hard time recovering. But if you let them get back in, you're in trouble. And that was just the psychological profile that we began to see for them. One of the other things is, what are the setter or the hitter tendencies? What do you look at? For China, they always had that go-to player, their big hitter, but the others were very, very aggressive as well. And those are those types of things you want to look at that definitely you can get off of your stats, those types of things. And fortunately, we've already talked about some of that here. But, what are their susceptible passers? What defenses do they run? What are those tendencies in the defenses? Where are they aggressive and where are they passive? And, I think you've got to really look at all those types of things so you begin to look at how can we, again, bust them down to make them come down to our level. As much as knowing the team, I also have learned I have to know that coach really, really well. And fortunately, the Chinese coach and I are pretty good friends. We know each other pretty well, but also studying each other and what we do on the bench is important. And so some of those things, what is he or she, do they rotate their lineup ever, or do they just go, we're the Giants, you got to beat us, we're not changing anything. And what types of things do you do? One thing we found out with China is that they only ever started in 3 different rotations. And mainly they put their best hitter in, start them in area 4. Sometimes they'd move it back 1 to 5. And only one time ever did I ever see them start it in 6. And that was for 2 sets against us in the World Championships when they were down. So that information was really good for me because then it helped me to start making some really good decisions about how we wanted to go against them in our lineups because we were susceptible in some of our lineups with the matchups. And there were certain things, if we did it, if they would have rotated forward, so if they would have put their best hitter in, let's say, 3 or 2, we would have had some very, very difficult matchups. But I had a pretty good basis to go off of to say, I don't think they'll do it. Now, just because you never see it doesn't mean they won't, but that's some of the information you want to try to get. Will he or she make changes on the fly? And you may know that about yourself, or you're looking at that on other opponents. Are they one of those people that will go like, we've never seen this before, we have to change something, we call a timeout, and they just, hey, I'm going to design something and you guys go out and do it? Or is it the type of coach that's like, we're not going to try anything if we have never practiced it? And I think, again, that's good information to know because you've got to know if you have some good information on them, when are you going to throw it at them? Are you going to give them time to try to make changes or not? Will they make changes? Those are types of good information to know. China, for us, was one of those that, they did not like to make changes on the fly. They would make minor changes, when things were happening, but they didn't like to make major changes at all. Another one is, will he or she make changes to counter your match plans during the match and then the next side of that are before the next time you played them. Again, China did not like to make those major changes, minor, but they always counteracted any new things that we tried to throw at them, always. So when we started really attacking lines a lot more, and they were pretty susceptible to that, making them chase, next time we played them, they're starting at the pins and they're making us try to come inside on them. You know, we tried to do some other things and they just wouldn't do much during the match, but they would always have another game plan for us to kind of try to counteract what we had just done. Again, for me, very good information to know as I go in game planning against them, especially if we get to the gold medal match. You know, I've always known this concept, but it just really became very, very clear for me. You are in a rotational battle. There's 6 rotations, and you have to figure out how you're going to win those rotational battles. And many times, you're not going to be able to win all 6. And especially in those tight matches, you're not winning all 6. So you have to figure out one way or another how we're going to try to win, you know, 4 out of those 6 rotations. That really helps. If not, how to keep them close. But how can I win some and how can I minimize the losses on those rotations? So what's that point spread when I do lose that rotation? What's the point spread there? Because I have to minimize that. And so that's when you start looking at rotations specifically and not the whole picture. So, you know, those things of looking at, you know, how do they block in this rotation as compared to another rotation? What are their passers do? One thing that I learned, this wasn't on China specifically, but on some things that we saw. So many times we see things in holistic manner. So if we see a good passer, and you know this person's passing lights out, most likely what do we say to our players? Don't serve her, right? Serve anywhere but there. But when you start to look at things rotationally, what you'll find out sometimes is that passer's really good in 1 and 6, but they go to 5, and now maybe it's their worst passer. Or, you know, something like that along the lines. And there's reason for that. If you're looking at the stats, it just may show you they're not as good in this rotation. Then you have to go back to video or other things and figure out, well, why is that? But again, that was very good information for us in playing some teams, and it actually helped us in China. But again, those are those types of things that I think you have to look at statistically and by rotation. And I think it helps you with hitters as well, because you have some of those hitters that can be very, very good in certain rotations, and they may hit outside every time, but because something slightly changed, they're not as effective in one rotation as the other. And those are good key things to understand. You know, so some of the few things that we really observed with China, they were not able to always close their blocks. This is different from what you guys normally have to look at, but for us, what we noticed is in one of their rotations, their middle blocker only had a left leg, and she did not like to collapse it in. And their left side blocker only had the right leg, and she didn't like to collapse it in. So when they closed the block, when we were hitting a right side attack, they would be foot to foot, and we always could see a gap in between. They were just almost impossible to close that. Now again, it's probably not something that you see too often in the standing game, but there are things like that in the standing game that you'll see. Middle does not rotate as much when they close to one side, so they're late getting there, so they leave part of a seam better than they do going to the right side, or those types of things. But that's, again, great information. Number 5, for China, boy, very, very aggressive hitter. She's not really big, but aggressive. We started noticing, and I really can't tell you that I was looking for this. It was just one of those aha moments when I'm looking through all the videos and watching her just attack. all of a sudden I started seeing that anytime that she started to rotate to turn line, 80% of the time she was aiming for hands. 80% of the time. And they were big, big cuts. So, again, we take that information. I was like, we can use this. Number 12, their best hitter and one of the best hitters in the world. Primarily a cross-court hitter. Even if she's moved inside, she's still going cross. She just likes cross. The problem is you can't stop her going cross most of the time, so it didn't matter where she hit it. But we started seeing that somewhat, and it was almost like we were just baiting her to go line. So we started moving our block way in, trying to force her back to line. But we also noticed that she did not like to hit cross body line. If she was going line, she'd face line. So again, good information to give to our blockers. Again, this wasn't me. It was our assistant coaches that found some of this. But some serve-receive spots that they had that we saw from just looking at a number of analysis of games that if we served certain spots, statistically, their passing was not efficient enough where almost 60% of the time, likelihood, they weren't going to be able to set her on the outside. Again, I'm looking at that going like, I like that since that's their best attacker. If I serve this spot, not looking for the ace, just looking that they don't set her. Now, again, I have a better ability to win that rotation. Again, number 12, when she would rotate to the middle, they would have her attack middle first and then rotate to the outside. And again, this is one of the best attackers in the world, but we started noticing that hitting out of the middle, she either liked to attack hands or she would tip to zone 4. And again, good information to have. And then, we started seeing some really effective serving spots that we thought they had some weaknesses, and especially some blocking matchups. I tend to be more of a defensive-minded coach, so I like to put my best blockers on their best hitters. But I still look at it rotationally to see if that's going to be the most effective way for us. But most of the time, that in our scheme, that's been real effective for us. So those are a few things that we began to see. This is a picture of what I was talking about. So you see the legs. So all of a sudden, we started seeing this gap. Heather here is actually going line off the hands, I think. But I was just telling our players, yes, you don't even have to hit it hard. They're playing a pretty good perimeter defense on us, deep, which they're usually don't play that deep against anybody else but us, but it left a pretty good hole in the middle. And so we're just telling them, chop it, down in the middle of the court. They dig it, so what? But that's a good, effective shot. But that's something that we were seeing. I also think she butts lifts a lot, but that's a whole nother subject. All right, this is number 5. I'll show you a video here in a second. We did actually get in the finals to where we had Kaleo, which is number 14, our setter, lining up on number 5. But prior to the gold medal match, this is what we saw a lot. One is we were just saying, yeah, hit her hands, it's okay. And so we saw a lot of balls hitting and going out of bounds. We changed that scheme in the gold medal match. Now, I don't know if I can start this or... Nope. Is there a way, yeah, if they can start it back there maybe? If not, you guys will just have to trust me. Oh, there we go. So that's number 5. Yeah, she likes cross court, can hit pretty well. She's the one that likes to attack those hands a lot. So you see, she's not really tall, but can hit pretty well. That's what happened to us quite a bit. like that. Cleo's doesn't like seeing that, but so what I'd also seen where you saw there, when she did not make contact with the hands, there was a lot of balls that were out of bounds deep. Again, that was great information for us. So a great aggressive swinger, like to use those hands. I didn't know it was this long, but. Next slide. If they can help me start this one now. So number 12 out there has been predominantly one of the best hitters in the world for a while. She likes that cross court. She can hit it. Big, tall player. You can see it. She just continues to go cross, 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 cross. Loves it. So I'm just showing this just so that as we're reviewing video and looking at things, these are some of those things we kept watching, to see those tendencies and stuff like that. Of course, when you're chasing the giant, you're looking for anything you can possibly use that'll try to help you to close that gap. He doesn't tip very often out of that position, but I'm going to move to the next. They'll start that one. This is when 12 is in the middle. I just wanted to show you what I was talking about. She loves to use hands, and she tips to area 4 a lot. There's one of those hand shots. That was a rare turn at the high hands. Just continue. You see how, again, up high hands. And in our game, that can be an effective shot. It's really difficult to try to know when they're going high, when they're hitting in. So you have to really, try to make a lot of observations on that. There's the shot that I'm talking about, that she's tall enough she can make that, drastic tip. So, again, those were just some of the things that we started seeing. Another thing that I think I learned out of this is, and I believe in keeping things simple, but you have to be effective enough at your level. So if it's too simple, it's not enough. So you have to do what you need to do. But for sure, in high pressure situations, I think your players are on overload emotionally and stuff. So as simple as you can make it, I think it's better off. So, you have lots of information. What information are you going to give out? And what is it that you're actually going to share with the team now? What do you hold back to say, if we need it, this is what we'll give them? One of the things we did going in gold medal match was we changed from our previous matches and started so that we always had the same matchups. So rather than having our players that back up one for serve, that kind of thing, before we would just stay, like usually we had Cleo always starting one. So depending on whether we serve first or receive first, we'd have few different matchups. Gold medal match, we were always going to rotate one way or another to always have the same matchups every single rotation. And again, a little bit of a gamble, but that's what we were choosing to do. I think that made it way simpler for our players, so that we go, these are the people you're always going to be blocking against. So look at them, see what they're doing, let's study them. When you're serving, these are the people you're always going to be serving against. So here's the spots we want. So I wasn't having to tell two players, this may be who you're serving against. It was just really simple to say, study this, this is where you're going. China had multiple defensive holes like any of us do, but I tried to dumb it down to where I was just like, in every rotation, no matter where we hit from, left, middle, or right, they're playing perimeter. If you need to opt out on a tip or roll, just go to the donut, go to the middle, make them play it. And so again, not trying to give them too much information. Just go there, we'll live with what we have on the results, and I'll change later if we have to. So again, just a few things, slight differences, but made it way simpler for our athletes. As a quick picture, this was Nikki going, she's actually doing a little bit of a tip. She's going to that, to the zone 3 there, which is one of those things we were trying to push for. One other big thing I think that we learned was the team that plays together stays together. We heard that phrase, but man, it was just so evident for us and just continued to make a difference for us. We did a lot of things for bonding, and for our ladies, I think some of those bonding things were way different than what I would do with our men. So some of the best things that they liked was we did a painting deal before we went to the Paralympics, had an artist come in, had a design made up of the ball and the Paralympic logo and Rio 2016, some stuff like that, and everybody painted it. And they weren't all there right together, but it was amazing to me watching them. We're all painting the same thing, but they're going from one person to, oh, I like what you did there. I may try that in on my thing, and something, they're doing all around the room like that. And so it was one of those things that was really bringing them together, discussion and just looking at what other people were doing, things like that. Now, if I tried that with our men, they would have looked at me once or twice and, it was like, what, are you kidding me? Now, if I take the men to go out to laser tag and put them in teams and go, all right, the winner gets this, now they're cooking, and that's what's really motivating them. But we did some just really simple things like that with our ladies. And we did some more complex things as well. But I just started finding that sometimes just the simplest things can bring them together just as much as some of the complex things do. So that unity made a difference. And one of the biggest things that I knew something was different was when I was understanding that they knew, they were saying, we all hated silver by this time. I have a phone, it's in my bag, it's gold. I had everything, we hate silver. But as much as we hated silver and we wanted gold, we knew that the thing that was going to get us there was that win or lose, we're together. And when I really started seeing that from our players, I really started seeing we got a shot at this thing. As much as that gold medal meant to them, it meant more to them that we were together as a team. And even on things that were said on Facebook, Laura Webster, this was her 4th Paralympics, so she had a bronze and 2 silvers. How much you think that gold meant to her? But here's her statement, it's gold medal day. She's been there before. It's the exact place, preparing again for China. But this time it's different. As we walk into the gym tonight, we walk in as a team who trust each other, a team who knows that each other and every one of us has given everything. And they sacrifice together. They'll leave it on the court no matter what. And we're more of a team today than we've ever been. We're here to win. We're prepared. We're ready. And most of all, we're in this together. I knew we had a team. That was important. Here's another one from a 3-time Paralympic player, Nicole Millage. I'll show you the picture here in a second. I absolutely love this picture with my bench buddies. Okay? Now, how many of your players, all right, this is our role right now. We know what we have to do. If we're ready to get in the game, but if not, we're ready to do what we've got to do on the bench, and we're even going to give ourselves names so it even makes it better. So our bench buddies, that was our playful nickname for each other. We had fun with it. You know, we recognized the importance of our roles. These girls kicked major butt. Personally, she said other words, but on and off the court, they are the future of this team. It was my honor to sit alongside them as we patiently waited for our turns to play. Every player wants to be out on the court all the time, but it's also fun as heck to watch your other amazing and hardworking teammates go out there and play their best. China didn't know what hit them, and that's the picture. Nicole's in the middle. Alexis that spoke last night is there on the left. Tia on the right. And again, it was one of those things that, man, as we were changing and the things that we saw that really was going to make a difference for us in that transition from silver to gold, that was one of them. We were more of a team than we ever had been. I told you I'm already more of a defensive coach than probably an offensive coach. I still believe defense wins championships. I still think you have to have pretty good offense, though, right? And one of those things that I think helped us in our transition was after we lost the World Championships, totally went back in with the team, and we started changing every single player's defensive posture to a whole different position than what we had ever played before. It was difficult. Some may not have bought into it as quick as others, but once they started seeing how effective it was, they really started pushing hard on it. I think you'll see more of that when I show some live match stuff, but you can see Kaleo there in the middle, how down and forward she is. Our defense was as best as it's ever been, and I think that was one of the major contributors that we were willing to make those changes that we thought would make a difference for us, and the players bought into it and were willing to make that change as well. One other thing that I think I learned was always hold something back if you can. So I already told you we had seen some things that we thought would be effective for us that we could use. We didn't use any of it in our pool play match. We saved it. So, some of the patterns we saw, we attacked lines in London. They changed stuff again before World Championship. We attacked over their middles in the World Championship in 2014. By the time we played Intercontinental Cup, they had made changes. In pool play, we served number 12, their best attacker, almost across every time we could. We started primarily in rotation 1 the whole time, whether we served or not. In the gold medal match, we started in 1 when we served, 2 when we received, so we all had the consistent matchups. We did serve those gaps that we had seen that we could, from a pretty good likelihood know that number 12 was not going to get set. We set the right side so that they could hit in between that block that I showed you. We dropped hands, and you'll see this, and kudos to Kaleo, she did a great job. Monique out of the middle did a great job with it, but they had to really read those hitters, but when they thought that they may be going hands, we dropped hands. And that can be really difficult because that court is so small. If you're a defender behind that block, all of a sudden they're like, but I was ready to go. It's like, look, if you read it and drop it and they swing and hit it in, I'll take that. It's on me. I'm all right with that. Right now, I'd rather err on that side than err on the side of you getting used. So we tried to use that. We dropped our hands on block in 3 different situations on hitters. And then we blocked a hard cross on their best hitter when she was outside. I think I'm going to have to get you to start that again. Watch this defense. You see the forward posture there. Really helped us. Serving the spots very effectively. Good defensive play there. Could have been a butt lift maybe, but no. If you look up there, we're 2 up now. Sets, third set. And we're kind of rolling by this time. One of these in here, I thought, see Kaleo dropping the hands on one of them. That was one of those gap hits I was talking about. There was a drop hands there. Ball sailed out. You never see that in your standing game either, I think. So an exciting moment right there for us. And like I say, you know, there's very few times when you I think, make a good game plan, that the team executes the game plan, and it all flows together like that. Sometimes it happens. You know, I personally, I just don't think China knew what hit them. And our players did an outstanding job making stuff happen. Now the joy's coming out. Huge victory. And again, a lot of lessons learned on my part in that transition. Hopefully maybe you can gain a little bit out of that too as you look at some of those challenges that you have. And maybe that can help you in some of what you're looking at. I don't know how long I have, but questions?
Bill, before you do the questions, you have about 5 minutes for questions, but because we're recording, if you could just repeat the question so that we can get it for our
Okay,
video.
she said that she wanted me to repeat stuff so that they could hear. Okay. Questions? Yeah.
How do you, I guess, convince a team to believe? How do you convince yourself, you know, after the third or fourth time you've lost it?
Yeah. So the question is, how do you convince yourself, me, and how do you convince the team after so many second place finishes that they can actually accomplish and achieve and win the gold medal? I think it's just a lot of little pieces. I think one is we thought we could win in London. We thought we could win the World Championships. And, you know, we just kept, all right, what do we got to change now? What do we have to do just a little bit better? And they kept looking at some of that going like, I can see how we're getting better here. And so that was, I think, the power there. Part of it is we played China every chance we could get. And part of that was so that they would see, you know, it's just another team. They're a good team, but they're just another team. And the more comfortable we got with playing them, I think the more confidence that they continue to build. And then once we saw our finish in World Championships, where we basically gave them that match. We should have won it. Then we came out, we worked hard, but they knew that they could do it. And I think then that confidence just continues to build. So, you know, we could have very easily have lost that match as well, but I think that they had that confidence at that point, win or loss. That's a good question. Plus, we had a good sports psychologist working with them, and I think that played major dividends as well.
You think there's hurdles along the way that back and reflecting upon it?
There's always hurdles. So the question was, are there hurdles that you had to face before you got to this point? there's internal hurdles and there's external hurdles, I think. For us, some of the internal stuff was, some of our players to continue to believe in themselves, for our team to continue to not unite, which, again, I think that was one of our goals that we knew we had to overcome internally. I think changing our defense was a hurdle I probably had to overcome first and try to figure out what are we going to do. And then the hurdle is, how do you get them to trust you and believe that, all right, this is the best thing? And some players usually will buy in quicker than other players, and that's always going to be the case. But that's a hurdle. External hurdles, for us, some of it, it didn't change from World Championships to here. We still had those hurdles, and we just had to face it. Like, we only have a limited amount of budget of the number of matches we can play. And I'd love to be able to play more international matches. We just can't. So I have to try to figure out how can we try to, get the best matches that we can for the money that we have. And then without those matches, how can we replicate as close as we can? You can never get it exactly right. But how can we replicate those types of situations as best we can on our home soil? So, is that kind of what you were talking about, or you're looking for some more dirt?
I would never do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Ask the players tomorrow. That'd be a great question for them. Yeah. Any others? Good. Yeah, one more.
I guess, would you say like the main difference between
So the question is, what do I think the major change was between London and Rio? Was it defense? Was it the chemistry of the team? Those type of things. And my answer would be yes. I think it was all of those. Personally, I believe it's very rarely are you going to be able to just change one thing and that makes all the difference. There's probably a number of things that you have to try to hunt for. But I also think I approached the match differently in Rio than I did in London. Now, I felt like our staff and I did a great job in London, but we still approached it differently in Rio because we evaluated what we did there and how can we do some things better. In hindsight, that's one of the reasons why I said I have to go simpler in the gold medal match, because I think we gave them too much information in the gold medal match in London. Offensively, we were always getting better, but that was another major thing. We had across the board about 4 hitters that we could go to, a really, really balanced offense. And I don't want to say that none of our hitters were as good as number 12 in China, but because I think we have some that are really close, but she's very, very good. But there's no way that they did not have the balance that we had offensively. And so they were chasing us all the time. And that helped. And then I think the defensive moves really helped us. We did not play defense like that before. Balls that were hit at us, that we would get touches, but we just weren't controlling them so that we could counterattack. And that was important for us. And that's what China was used to, is that they could either use those hands for immediate points, or they'd hit balls hard enough that you were just freeing them back over or just getting balls back over to them. And so they were just rocking on you, And now all of a sudden, we're countering those balls, hitting back at them, putting them on the defensive side. A little bit of a lot of things. The chemistry was huge as well. And boy, how do you change that? I mean, I think it's culture. I think it's just addressing it and letting them know we've got to get better at this. I think some of it is you have to let those players know that you really mean that team is important. And I'm not going to go into it here, but I had to do some things at certain times with some certain players, and I think not only did it mean something to them, but I think it meant something to the team as well, that they knew he's serious. And all those things kind of culminating together, I think, really helped. Yeah, thanks. I think we're done. So if you need it, I can answer it later. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah.